Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Step into the Pivot. We are so happy to have you join us. We have another amazing guest this week, and I'm so excited and to invite to welcome Hannah Austin. So, Hannah, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Super excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And since I don't know your story at all, our listeners know that I love to we love to just be natural conversation. So I'm super excited to have you and hear your story. Evie, do you want to talk a little bit more about Hannah, maybe how you guys met?
Yeah, this is Teresa. This is officially our first guest where neither one of us is totally certain where the guest is going to take the story. This is the first time we're doing that because typically, one of us will have talked to the guest at depth and knows exactly the key pivots. But what happened here between Hannah and I is we're part of an organization that's wonderful here in Portland, LEAP Leaders and Executives Across Professions. And we've had several occasions where we met. And then, as part of the group gathering, or maybe some exercises that we're doing that are icebreakers, team building, I got to know Hannah as someone who always has something wonderful to share. So we would have a group conversation, and then she would just start, talking from a place of wisdom. And then I really wanted to get to know her better. We started scheduling some time to get to know each other, get to know the story. And I realized that I would ask her in a one-on-one the same questions I can ask her here in front of everybody. So I said to Hannah, let's invite my friend Teresa and our listeners, and let's get to know each other on the show. Does that sound good to you still, Hannah?
Oh, it's so exciting. And thank you so much for the background. It's been such a pleasure seeing you at events, and it's so great to have a richer conversation today.
So, what we do here on the pivot is exactly kind of like what naturally comes up whenever you talk, which is we talk about life lessons. And we start by asking our guests to vulnerably share. And by vulnerably, I really mean like courageously, bravely, open heart, something that is perhaps a single life event. Perhaps it was a series of life events. Perhaps it was a transition period, but something that when they look back now, they would say, this really shaped me. It changed me in a way that was not easy. So, like, a definition of a pivot is I didn't really want this. On average, our guests talk about something that was not really wanted. But at the end of the day, it really now, when I look back, is something that served me. So you can take us someplace very positive and be like, this thing that happened, it was an amazing thing, and it also pivoted me. But I suspect you have a lot of life stories that fall into this, like how to make lemons out of,
Lemonade.
lemonades and,
Yeah.
and the other way around.
Absolutely. Well, I love this question because really it is why we're talking probably today. So, about 2021, right before COVID, literally right before COVID, I had felt kind of a midlife crisis coming on at the age of 41. I felt like I had been in my career for 20 years. I was kind of at the top of my game. I was getting groomed to be in a larger development CEO position, but I literally collapsed in the hospital that I was managing staff in. I worked at a place called Kaiser Permanente. I had managed the nurses and doctors for several years, but I woke up to a physician that I had managed for several years saying, Hannah, what are you doing to yourself? You're killing yourself. You're overworking yourself. Shortly after that, COVID happened. I was in a process of, managing end of life or death situations when I worked at Kaiser, literally patients coming in the hospital dying, we having to create a task force to help people stay healthy and stay out of the hospital. But at that time, I really realized that the career and the life that I thought I had built for myself the last 20 years no longer served me. I was very unhealthy emotionally, mentally. I was, engaging in activities that I shouldn't have been engaging in. I was drinking wine at night and binging Netflix and ordering Uber Eats instead of taking care of myself and working out. I worked at the largest healthcare institution and I was one of the most unhealthy people. And so there was a lot of conflict inside me. I actually got to the point where I wanted to end my life. And I am such a positive person. And those people around me didn't know what was going on. In fact, I kept acting like everything was fine. And I think often as women, we do that. We keep pushing the accelerator down. We keep moving forward because we are leaders and moms and superwomen, right? And that really led me to the darkest moment of my life. I actually was in the bathroom. I collapsed on the bathroom floor and I looked up to the universe and said, I don't want to do this anymore. And the universe said to me, get up. Get up, you are not done yet. And during a course of events for the next couple weeks, I decided to walk away from a 20-year career in order to save myself, both mentally and emotionally, with the support of my husband. And that began a pivot that is absolutely incredible. I started a podcast. It went viral, one of my episodes. I wrote a book about burnout, recovering and healing from burnout. And now I'm writing my second book. So created my company based on, I would say, the darkest moment in my life and turned it into the biggest, brightest moment.
So yeah, because I've talked very openly about my burnout because I experienced burnout, maybe not to the same extreme as you did, but like I definitely recognize I don't want to do this anymore. I need to do something different. So I love that you're talking about this, Hannah, because it is so important. And I think sometimes we're scared, like, and even you and I've talked about this even with other guests, right? Or about me, right? Like sometimes we're just so scared what's that next thing gonna look like that we're like, oh, we have to just keep going. And I love your superwoman, right? Because we are superwomen, we can do everything. So yeah, that just the way you started totally resonated with me.
Yeah, there are
Yeah.
these two famous stories that this reminded me of. There is there are stories of women, basically collapsing at their desks overworking. I think one of them is Ariana Huffington. That's a famous
Yes.
example. And
Yes.
then the other famous example is Elizabeth Gilbert in Eat, Pray, Love. It basically starts something like this. It's on the floor. And then there's this message of like, okay, there will be support. There will be people who come, like the doctor that tells you, hey, this is not a good idea. Right? You'll
Yeah.
have external influences that say, listen up, this is not good. But at the end of the day, it is, you have to make that choice to get up. Even the divine intervention, comes in and says, in your case, get up. I think in Liz Gilbert's book, it's like, no one's coming, like go to bed, right? But you still have to make that choice. And I think that's where the courage is and where the free will comes in.
Mhm.
You could be supported, but you still have to get up, get out of the bathroom, and then tomorrow start implementing some of these new actions. So you did, I think, like the shortest episode ever. We could stop recording because she did the whole thing, right? Here's what happened. This is how I took all the, wait, I'll do it right this time. I took all the lemons and then I turned it into lemonade.
But what
And,
but I was gonna say, Evie, what I would love for her to talk a little bit more about, like you talked about how your kind of work growth went, right? Like you started a company and you did a book and you did a podcast and you did all that, which is absolutely amazing. I'd love to talk about a little about your emotional journey and maybe even your mental health journey, because I think those are important pieces of what we as women, particularly, and not just as women, right, that we need to discover about ourselves sometimes. So that's what I was
Oh,
thinking. And
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. Like without now the details, fill in the
yeah,
blanks, what happened there, like the next day and the next day, if you want to tell us about like, it was hard. The daily
Yeah.
actions are challenging.
Well, I love that question, Teresa, because it's exactly what my journey has been. You mentioned, what is it? Go a little bit deeper. And the reality of the situation is when you are at a dark place and you are not good about asking for help, the next thing you do is throw yourself into something, which is exactly what I did. So you would think of someone who struggles with burnout, wouldn't start a company, wouldn't launch a podcast, wouldn't write a book all in 2 years. It's like, girl, you didn't learn anything. But the reality is, writing the book was the healing journey. What I realized through my podcast, and I know you guys probably appreciate this as well, being podcasters, is all of the things you learn from your guests, all of those pearls of wisdom that you're learning. And so, as I was teaching myself how to recover and heal, I was doing the same thing for other people, right? And so when you're hearing those words back to you, or someone's telling their story, like, yes, Teresa, I burned out as well. Tell me more. And you're sharing stories as women, it becomes this like interconnected hug. You hear for the first time, you are not alone. You are not a failure. You are not weak, right? Because often as managers and leaders, we have to be stronger than the people we think that we're managing. And the reality of the situation is, if you have no authenticity, you have nothing. If nobody trusts you, you have nothing, right? You're just a leader or a manager with a badge. You are actually not tried and true, a true leader. So this personal journey has been absolutely terrifying, absolutely painful. It has been elating. It's been the best time of my life. But when I go to parties and I say, what do you do? I say, well, I spent 20 years as an executive in healthcare, but I blew up my life and I launched a podcast. I wrote a book, and they look at me like, oh my God, you're crazy. But tell me more about the new life you're created. And for the first time, I will say this, I always was building my life forward. I was always in my 20s saying, oh, well, when I'm in my 30s, I'm going to do this. And in my 30s, I'm going to plan for retirement. And in my 40s, and I hope to retire at 60. That's just kind of how our society works. But for the first time in my life now, knowing that I have triggers and I have a problem with burnout, I've burned out 6 or 7 times since I wrote my book, right? It's like recovery. It's like being an alcoholic. It's called a workaholic, right? And if you haven't healed your ego problem of who am I without a title or without without my badge, or who am I truly as an individual, if you haven't done that deep wound healing, you're going to continue that perpetual pattern. So although
Yeah.
it's been a painful and exhilarating journey, it has been one of, I'm learning more every day, but I have to be very, very conscious not to have those triggers and not to overextend myself to start doing more things to validate who I am as a human being.
I was going to ask you, have you then had to reflect on what led to that original big burnout? And then what are you doing today to catch it sooner,
Yeah.
to
Well,
catch it when you're starting to be at
and I
capacity?
was gonna ask, right? I think that sometimes there are things we have to say goodbye to, right? Like, and I think that all ties into Evie's question, right? Like, what did you to move past that? I think sometimes you have to let some things go to really do that. And the fact that you kind of are still moving that direction. So in tying into Evie's question, I'd love to kind of hear you talk about that a little bit.
I mean, I have to let go of the idea um, that the dream that I had to retire from that career, I had to let go of that dream. I had to actually think bigger for myself. Now that I look back on that, I think, gosh, you wanted to be the CEO of Kaiser Permanente. That's great. That's wonderful. That was a good goal. But at what cost? And so for me, it was really, is that really your journey? Or was your journey to work there for 20 years and say, I have other skills, I have things I want to do, I have bigger plans for my life, and let go of that? So it was the loss of one dream to start another, which I never realized that my life could be more technicolor. And what I mean by that is, I thought that being the CEO of a company, that was like a badge of honor, like girl boss, that's what you were taught, or at least I was taught. I never was taught, follow your heart and make money, or what you could have it all in that sense, right? I was always taught that status was the best, but never was I the CEO of my own life. I felt like my path was so carved out for me by my own rigid, myopic view that I didn't have a greater breadth and width of what could actually be possible that made my heart stronger and sing more. Does that make sense? So I was really looking for, I thought that my life was going to be technicolor, but it wasn't. I was not using my creativity. I was not using my gifts. And I was working harder than I ever had to work. When you're working harder, that is not your path. An effortless path is what you are supposed to be doing, truly. So if I can say to anything from your audience today, if you're going to work and you're grinding and you feel like you're working as hard as you can, that's not the answer. The answer is to stop and pause and say, what do I really want to do? What lights me up? And then make a plan backwards to design the life you want and then build your life backwards versus this is what I want to do and hard charge forward.
Mm-hmm. I love what you're talking about. That you're bringing it all in together because you're highlighting also that it's not just enough to have enough and quit. Because if you had done that, sometimes I talk about oblige or rebellion. I love Gretchen Rubin's model of the tendencies. And Hannah, I know that we also talked about that. Teresa, I introduced her to it too. And what will happen to us obligers, that's the tendency where it's really easy to meet everybody else's expectations of you, external expectations, but you don't meet internal expectations. And then you'll still engage in some of those, hormonally soothing behaviors of Netflix binging, right? And what happens for obligers often is that we'll go through what's called obliger rebellion. So it will be like, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm not okay underneath, but like I'm doing it, I'm doing it. And then I blow up over like the smallest thing. But that's not, and then it'll be like, I quit. That's not enough, right? And I love what you're talking about is that it wasn't enough to just say, I'm walking away from this career. It's too much, it's too this and that, and then just essentially skip over all the inner work and all the deeper questions. That's
Mhm.
when almost kind of like some other form of work started. So tell us about how that translates into the book. The book's title is so lovely, and we can see it for our audience that's watching on YouTube. Hello, Head Meet Heart is in your title. It really sounds like not only a tagline, but basically a principle that you live by.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned, so when I was at my darkest place and I finally was asking for help, I was like listening to podcasts, reading articles, anything to get me out of the dark spot I was in. And what I really needed was to hear from another woman that said, what you're feeling is totally normal. You are not alone. I see you. But I mean, I read every single book. Like I was like, oh, the Burnout books from the twins. And then I read, Ariana Huffington's. Like I was deep in it. But never was it a book that was like, you're at your darkest moment. What's next? And I think, Theresa, you mentioned that early on. Like, you're afraid to get out of the situation you're in because what is next? And the scary thing about fear, right? Is it better to stay in a bad situation or is it good to take a leap of faith and not know, right? And I think that's when a lot of us reach our breaking point is when you say, I can't do this anymore. The fear of the unknown is safer to me,
Yeah.
is more exciting to me than what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. And you mentioned something else that really struck me too. It's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna work, work, work. I want to be CEO. I want to retire at 60. I want to do this. And we set that for ourselves. It's great to have a goal, right? Like it's great to have a goal. But you're exactly right. But like if you're 40 now and you have 20 more years, don't you want to be happy too? Don't you
Yeah.
want to like do something you love? Don't you
Yeah.
want to give back to others? I mean, whatever that looks like for you. So that's what I'm kind of feeling from you, which I
Yeah.
absolutely love. Walking away is really hard, but you have so much more to give that maybe you can even give better on this side of it.
Yeah. And I think that's so true. I think to go back to your question, Ivy, writing the book, I was never writing the book for everybody else. It was literally, and when you read the book, and I'll send you guys a copy, but the book is literally me writing in my journal. I mean, literally the first page of the book is me on the bathroom floor contemplating ending my life. That is the first page. So if that doesn't like say to you rock bottom moment, I don't know what is, but it talks about a woman being in her darkest moment and basically the clouds lifting and saying, giving yourself permission to not live a life of darkness, right? I mean, that's truly what it is. And every single chapter subsequently is my actual words that I've written in my journal, deep personal words infused with other women, other men. I interviewed hundreds of people around the globe about their burnout story. And each chapter is a life lesson of how to get up off the bathroom floor. What skills do you need? What do you say to yourself? The next thing is what's next? How do you get past your ego? How do you start taking all of those things and mistakes that you think you made and turning those into a different perspective of how can I create this as a life lesson? And how can I teach other women or men what not to do, right, in their careers to avoid burnout. That's really my passion now, is how can I save other people from a dark moment and make it a little bit of a softer landing for them. So the book is designed from a darkest moment to the lightest moment, basically taking the reader through the entire journey of what it takes to discover self-awareness, move past their ego, and really acknowledge who they truly are to live that extraordinary life they were always meant to be.
So exciting. I want to hear something that was for you one of the biggest, like, whoa, as you were learning and interviewing people and then implementing the learnings, what was something that was maybe it was super simple, but you just like never thought about it that way? That was like, oh, wow, aha moment.
I think the disconnect between how I saw myself and what I was feeling versus the perception of everyone around me. You know, how many women here, I thought everything was fine, everything was okay, but inside I was like dying, right? So it was just the contrast. And that's again why I have the title Hello Head Meet Heart, is what are you telling yourself? What is your brain saying to yourself? Those you're fat, you're ugly, you're not good at your job. I mean, how many women? I don't know one woman that doesn't negatively talk about themselves. I mean, they're lying if they say that they don't, right? And so, what is it that we can do to marry the inside and the outside of yourself? How can you connect ultimately your head and heart? And that was the biggest surprise, Ivy, is I wasn't seeing myself for who I truly was. I had lost myself in a path of shoulds,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, totally. Can you hold your book up again for those who are watching us on YouTube? So it's Hello Head Meet Heart. We'll put the link to that in our show notes for those who are on the podcast and may want to get a copy, because what you're saying really does speak, and you're totally right. Like what we feel inside versus what other people think we are. They still think we're these, and we are these amazing women. Like, don't get me wrong, right? Just because we suffer burnout or whatever, we're not. It's just that we don't allow ourselves to recognize that sometimes. Or, I think one of the things I learned is that, like, when something is bothering me, especially like with my husband or a girlfriend or something, I now just say it, and not but like sometimes I find I have to get that off my chest, right? Like I have to like say it so that it's not like going through my head forever, right? Like it's that kind of thing for me that I think I learned, and that really has helped me to recognize when, when that's happening.
Mm-hmm. One of the most powerful things I did, I love what you said, Theresa, about that, is that mismatch and then now using your voice. Because when you're in a corporate world, I don't know if either of you have worked in the corporate world, you can lose even the way you talk, right? It's corporate speak. It's all these, and at least in healthcare, it was like, I had acronyms up the yang. I could, now I'm like, I don't want to hear another acronym in my life.
You're in good
But
company. Our retirement plan
you're
friends
very good
listening
company.
are like, we will see you your acronyms. We'll raise you our acronyms.
Exactly. So one of the best things I did, I remember the moment I had resigned. They asked me to stay a month. I agreed to stay a month, which nobody ever does. It's like, why was I there a month? But anyways, I was sitting in the doctor's office and I was like, I don't know what I want or who I am anymore. And I literally opened the notes section of my iPhone and I wrote on the top who I am and what I love. And I just started listing. I am a bold, eccentric person. I lead with my heart. I hate disloyal people. Like I just listed all of this stuff out. And I looked at the page and I was like, this is who I am, but I can't marry that with who I am showing up at work. I've let myself, who am I anymore? Right. And so I just needed that moment to write down, like, this is what I know to be true. And I look at that as I've written my book, as I've been on, ABC, CBS, NBC, as I've gotten kind of too big for my britches some days. I'm like, this is who I truly am. And even now in my business, 3 years later, what do I want my legacy to be? This is who I am and what I want, right? So I think having that like strong pillar inside you and always going back to that, it's almost like a tree, like always going back to that root of like, who are you and what you love, knowing that I'll never go back to that burnout place as long as I'm staying true to who I am and what I love.
Well, and I love that you talked about when you started that, like, that finding our voice, right? And what that looks like for us. I love that you put it in that perspective, honestly. I think that this is an amazing conversation, that more women need to have their voice. and their honest voice, their truth, their, what makes them happy, what drives them, what makes that work. And this conversation was honestly way too short. So I'd love to hear, and Evie, you may have something to add. I would love to hear, Hannah, what's next for you. And I'm going to also say that I know you said one of the things is you're writing your second book. And honestly, when you get that second book done, I'd love to probably have you come back because I think this is an amazing conversation. But we talked a little, usually we ask like, how is this pivot a step forward? And I think you've answered that, but I think I'd love to hear kind of what's next for you.
Thank you for that. What's next for me is continuing to walk the path of alignment from a personal standpoint, because I know you asked about that, Theresa. From a business standpoint and from, sharing my voice and continue to spread wisdom, I'm writing my second book and I'm actually writing a series. So this was the first book, Hello Head Meet Heart. The second one is Hello Friend, a girlfriend's grown-up's guide to making new friends at midlife, because what I'm hearing from my female audience is there's a huge epidemic of loneliness. They're moving to different places. They're maybe starting a new career and they're feeling that sense of how do I make adult friends during midlife? So that's been kind of a fun thing. And then my third one is Hello You, how to help employees find their spark again. Because there are employees, whether they're sitting at home, working from home, or going back to the office, everyone's just kind of running on dull, right? So how can we help them find their spark again? So it'll be a series of 3 books that I'm currently kind of encapsulating. Right.
And I think we're going to have you back when you're done with book 2 and then when you're done with book 3, because I love this conversation. And if you were watching on YouTube, you saw when you talked about your second one about the friends thing, my mouth, I was like gaping because it's totally true. And I also think too, back to my point before, is sometimes we have to say goodbye to some of the people that were our friends that really either were not friends or just were there for a certain time in our life and, need to move forward with that a little bit. So thank you for that. Evie, I'm going to let you kind of wrap us up today because we are out of time, but this was an amazing conversation and I for sure want Hannah to come back.
It's so beautiful. What a great conversation. I could unpack 3, 4, 5 more things, but I think it's really wise to do let's practice together in real time, saying no, even to the things that work for us. I find that wisdom and maturity for women who've gone through burnout and then are managing their time better is also around saying no to things that are lovely and great, because you want to keep being aware of what you have, the time for. And we want to be respectful of your time, our listeners' time, and our commitment to keeping the pivot, around this like time that people can take a short lunch and walk around with your motivating messages. Thank you, Hannah. This was just such a step forward for our show too, listening about your pivots and how you've transmuted them and transformed them.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. All right. Thank you again, Hannah. I loved this conversation. It really energized me. To our listeners, I hope it energized you too. We will see you again in a couple weeks within 2 weeks with our next episode. So just remember, if you have a pivot, step into it.